So this man writes, traveling as this is being written, I cannot be sure of the date. My guess is it was the late 80s. But I sure do remember the meeting. One doesn't expect a teaching from a spiritual hero to be so explosive that physical violence seemed a real possibility. My invitation came courtesy of someone who knew my work with mindfulness and meditation, and I was one of only a handful of non-Vietnamese in an audience of around 100 gathered for a meeting with Thich Nhat Hanh. I was excited. It turned out the audience was primarily Vietnamese refugee boat people. Thai himself was a very small, very quiet person, but with a huge presence. The crowd was restless, even agitated from the beginning. And the agitation built quickly as Thai first spoke of the benefits of mindfulness and then moved on to address the elephant in the room, the pirates. The message was simple: stay with the anger, the blame, the rage, and continue to suffer personally, or learn to forgive and possibly move on a little and be free to live again. Simple message, incendiary effect. As his forgiveness message was developed, the agitation grew and rippled through the audience. I was sitting in the middle of the hall, and the crowd was becoming electric. Men were rising in their seats, muttering and cursing. Women were calling out. And the threat of violence was building. I'd never been in a meeting like it. Finally, a man in front of me just exploded. He jumped to his feet and hurled Vietnamese abuse at Thich Nhat Hanh. The moderator calmly asked him to change to English. The man switched without missing a beat and backed up a little. How dare you suggest we forgive? What gives you the right to speak in such a way to those of us who've lost so much? The man was screaming, and the man beside him holding him to prevent him lunging forward at Thai. My family was attacked by pirates. They bound me in the boat, then went to rape one of my daughters. My wife tried to intervene. They shot her and threw her overboard. Then they raped my daughter, shot her, and threw her overboard. My younger daughter they raped, but let her live. How dare you talk to me of forgiveness? I had never seen a good idea, that of forgiveness, so powerfully challenged in real life. The force of this heartbroken man, the anguish and pain in his voice, combined with a rage that was physical. The force of his words, if he had hit Thai, it would not have been much different. And he was not alone. Pretty well everyone in the room was at breaking point. I waited with some apprehension to see how Thai would respond. Was it possible to turn this around, to transform the energy that was so angry? Was he even going to get out of the hall in one piece? I was close enough to observe him. Thai was visibly moved, and in my own impure observation, a little taken aback. But he was seated as he spoke, and he paused. He deliberately sat back in his chair, just a little, and consciously breathed. I could see it, and it left an indelible impression in me. He returned to his breath, took a few almost imperceptibly deliberate, steadying breaths, held his silence, and began to speak in the same calm and steady voice he had been using before the tirade. These were the days before talks were recorded, so I'm not quite sure exactly how he did it. But he began by acknowledging the man's pain. Of course, anyone in his situation would be devastated and suffering deeply. Thai did this with such open sincerity and for long enough that the man started to calm down. Then somehow he skillfully shifted to the pirates and speculated on what sort of life they had led to get to where they could perpetrate such horrors on others. As the enraged man settled, Tai pointed out how these pirates started as fishermen who lived simple subsistence lives, totally dependent on the sea for food. When overfishing from outsiders depleted their food sources and their own families faced starvation, they turned to progressively more aggressive ways of making a living. There was no pretense that what the pirates did was okay, just an invitation to be a little understanding, an invitation to rethink the context of the trauma they were creating, an invitation to compassion. Then Tai moved on to ask the man about how it felt for him personally to suffer so much. At this point, the man moved from rage to tears. Between sobs, he spoke fitfully of how much he loved his wife and daughters and all that had been lost. The mood in the hall was swinging as the audience was caught in the feeling of collective pain. And finally, why not forgive? Maybe it is possible. It will not change the fact of what you have been through, but maybe it will free you to live and love more fully once again. I don't know how the man's life unfolded from there. I do hope he found some peace amidst extraordinarily difficult times. But for myself, I had witnessed an incredible example of how to be with someone in full rage, how staying calm and centered made it possible to be compassionately in the face of what seemed to be an overwhelming challenge. I'm pleased to be able to retell this story and to acknowledge that Thich Nhat Hanh provided a template for how to be with someone in extreme circumstances. This man took away how to be with someone in extreme circumstances. I took away from this story something that's been very valuable for me. Which is to be able to look to the other side of the situation and try to understand what might cause someone to behave that way. A question that that I often get from friends and family and students, and what do we do with people who hurt us? What do we do with difficult people? What do we do with that? So, in the Buddhist canon, we categorize people from like our beloved, our neutral, and our difficult. Ourselves first, our beloved, then neutral and difficult. And then we can even move on to and put another category at the end, which is the hateful people, the despots and the villains, the criminals, the tyrants. So Beloveds, if our husband does something to upset us, likely we can work it out, right? Or our child or something. Similarly, with neutral people, the cashier at the grocery store, you can usually forget about it. You let it go. But the difficult people, the people who really irritate you, they are troublesome. And there is something about these people that prevents your compassion from arising. Right? They're privileged or obnoxious or self-centered. That's a tough one. Selfish, insensitive. The hateful ones, the despots and villains, like they're on the extreme end. These people, they cause great suffering. Difficult people is slightly different, but people cause great suffering to others by hurting them. And maybe it's us. But even when it's not us, they hurt other people. They hurt us because we witness that violence. And they hurt themselves believing the delusion that the pain of others will alleviate their pain. They live in ignorance this way. They poison themselves, believing it's the cure to their suffering. When someone is hurtful, hateful, you could say. I think someone who asked last week was like, yeah, what about hateful people? Yeah, those hateful people, they're full of hate. They are full of hate. And when we respond to them with our own hatred, now it's two people that are full of hate. Before it was one, and now it's two. And Buddha said hatred is one of the three poisons. Hatred is when you have hatred towards someone or anger towards someone, it's like drinking poison, hoping that the other person dies. Drinking the poison, hoping the other person dies. So the three poisons he pointed out inside of us, hatred, greed, and delusion. The three large baskets that most of our suffering falls into. And hatred comes in a lot of different versions, right? It's kind of a word I could be like, well, I don't really hate anybody. But it has a spectrum. There's the aversion, like when you just generally don't like something. Disapproval, I just don't approve. I don't approve of that. Disgust, dislike, like repugnance, I guess, when you're repulsed by something. So there's a range of this form of suffering inside of us, and it can go from, hating olives on your pizza to hating Saddam Hussein, right? And Buddha said that all hatred is poison to the mind. Any hatred puts the mind ill at ease. A mind cannot be at ease with this mental formation inside of it. So, but, the question is, what do we do about it when someone hurts us? like when people let us down, when we witness other people, when we witness someone hurting others. Maybe it's just with their words or with their actions. It seems as though if you can do something about it, and by the way, I'll back up and say if you're being physically harmed, that's a whole separate discussion, right? But in general, if it's the kind of hurt that we usually experience, can you do something about it? Can you do something about it? If you can, then act, and your pain ends. A great example of that would be if you have a friend or an acquaintance who is hurtful and rude to you. It's just an acquaintance, it's not a family member, then you can not meet up with them, right? That's a very simple explanation. If there's nothing you can do about it, for example, if it's something you see in the news, and it's not within your capacity to change, let it go. Otherwise, it's insanity. Even my son said, as we were talking about this last week, what if none of my friends showed up? Mom, I invited them for my birthday and we're going to make them dinner. And what if nobody showed up and I was really hurt? And I said, I'd be angry. I'd be so angry if they all just dumped me and didn't show up, right? He's 18. Yes, your anger will arise. Oh, you guys, what? You forgot about me, or you had better things to do and you didn't care for my feelings. So it's natural that you would have anger arise. And the practice is when that anger comes, we see it, we acknowledge it, and then we let it go. If we continue to propagate the anger by repeating the story in our mind, we are drinking the poison. It's insanity. It's like a doctor maybe caring for patients. Maybe it's the COVID ward, and he has to care for a lot of people coming in who are sick, and he can help them, or she. And he takes the safety measures of putting a mask and a shield and gloves, because in order to help others, he needs to be well. If he too is sick, he can't help others. So, our instructions are when these situations arise in our lives, we see our pain, we see the pain, we get in touch with it, we acknowledge it. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I am afraid. Yes, I'm heartbroken. Yes. And then we let it go. And when it involves someone who has done something offensive, we ask ourselves, is there a reason? What could be a reason that they have done that? That practice that we do, finding that compassion. And it frees us. It frees us when we can not appreciate, it's not that. It's leaving some space for something other than an angry response or the hate, the natural hate. So it's a practice of finding a piece of compassion so that we can let go. This is for us so that we can be, so that we have the capacity to care for ourselves and others.